We'll be starting around now. Okay. Okay, so straight to the point. The first variation we're going to be covering is in the advance. So, starts with e4, e6. This is the first move of the French. And then when they take the center, and then we play d5. Okay, so c5, c3, knight c6, continue to add pressure, knight f3. And now here, bishop d7. Okay, so bishop d7 comes with the idea of placing the rook on c8 and eventually taking in the future and going knight b4. This is basically the main idea. And if they play bishop d3 is the most common move, rook c8 basically sets the idea up. So of course, if they castle, then well, takes here. Well, now this bishop's dead. If the bishop goes back to e2, then of course we go here. Rook is trapped, and you're winning.
Okay, now my question.
Yeah, you can ask. Sure.
Yeah, what is the importance of winning that light square bishop?
So in the French, when they play the advance, this light square bishop is going to be a very huge problem when you're attacking, when they're attacking. So for example, if we make any like random moves, like for example like this bishop is going to be staring at our king side when we castle. So we need to eliminate it in the French as soon as we can.
Yeah, okay, I understand the potential of the bishop, right?
Yeah.
Like, not blocked by pawns or anything compared to the bishop on c1, but I'm just struggling to understand the importance of winning that bishop, especially in the close position where you're giving up the knight for it.
Well, okay. So this bishop is a very important attacker compared to the dark square bishop, which of course in the advance is blocked by all these pawns. And basically, like if we want to continue our plan of like this and castling safely, this bishop basically needs to go. Like for this knight, this is a very good trade if we can eliminate his bishop. So a very common move here is a3 to stop our plan. Now we take, so they can no longer take, and we fix the center. And now we play the move queen b6. Now we target this pawn. We continue to target it. After bishop c2, now a very thematic move is the move g5. At first, this looks like a very strange move, but it mainly comes with the intention of playing g4 to kick away the knight. And we will win this pawn if they don't do anything. And if they take with the knight, then of course this is hanging along with the bishop, and we have a good position here. We will play h6 in the future if they move their bishop, kicking away the knight, and we will just continue our development like this. So, and if they take with the bishop, like this, now the rook is trapped. They have to play knight this. They have to play knight bd2 in order to save the rook, and knight takes d4. We threaten the bishop, and we win the pawn. For example, this white's position is falling apart.
Could I add something real quick? Just
yeah.
You go back to before bishop d3 on move 6.
Okay.
Yeah, there was like, I think Dominic was asking why bishop d7 instead of the queen b6. So then I was telling him you don't know where the queen's supposed to go, and then there's also this funny trap after bishop d7.
Yeah, bishop d7. Yeah, both are obviously fine. This is more so the main line-ish to immediately target the center. But I like bishop d7 slightly more because you allow the rook to get free. And of course, there's always this idea in the future. Not now, because that hangs the knight.
Yeah, and if your opponent doesn't know what they're doing after bishop d7, like you'll often see this bad move, bishop b5, which loses a pawn.
Oh, yeah, because knight e5, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, of course, bishop b5, knight e5, and that's just winning the pawn.
Yeah, but like practically speaking, right? Queen b6 is correct. Like.
Yeah, queen b6 is also the move.
Okay.
And now if they play this, you take, and then you can just take this pawn. Well, no, you can't take this pawn. Sorry, bishop d7 first to prevent the common military trap, and then they can't really defend this pawn anymore.
I have a question too, real quick. Sorry. So can you not go back, but can you bring the queen out and the bishop out real quick? So when you bring that out and they develop their bishop, and you're ready to take the d4 pawn, what if they take with the knight first instead of taking back with the pawn? Do you then trade knights to get that, or what would you do here? So let's say you take that, yes, and they take with the knight.
If they take with the knight first, already this isn't very good because this c3 pawn is blocking their knight from developing. So I think a move like bishop d7 first, and then you're already threatening to take the knight is fine. Right. And if they take, then go to the blue file.
Just a second.
And they can't develop the dark square bishop.
Just a second. They take back with the knight. You go back. So the knight on f3 was defending the e5 pawn. So here, white just black just wins a pawn with knight to c5, and black is up a pawn.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. So and another thing here is you don't want to take twice on d4. Like if you play knight to d4, queen d4, you lose.
Yeah, you don't want to take twice because of this. Right. So it's unfortunate you play bishop d7 first, and now the threat is to take on d4.
No. But here there's knight takes e5. The pawn is free.
And the pawn's free too. Yeah. Right.
So at that specific position, sorry, I'm so sorry. So when you take when you take the e5 pawn, after that, let's say they give a check with the bishop, would you just move the knight back?
Yeah. You would just block back.
Yeah, moving the knight back is completely fine, and you're just gonna go a6, get the bishop away, and then you just continue your standard development like this. And if you've managed to get the central pawns pushing in the French advance, then you've already gotten a pretty good position.
I would say
the whole idea behind the advance is just to gain space, and that's completely falling apart now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, go back once again. Sorry, I'm not shooting.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be back to bring the knight back to c6 after that? Because you'd be pressuring the d4. Huh? After knight takes d4, knight takes e5, and bishop e5, knight c6 again. Wouldn't this be better? No. Because you'd be pressuring the d4 pawn and pretty much forcing white to have to give up his bishop unless he wants to allow black to fight for control over d4, the d4 square.
Yeah, I mean, both are perfectly fine, but you can play this because if they take, now you kind of have more with this b file. And of course, another thing you can do is to block with the bishop and takes. Now their bishop is gone, and of course, same idea. And now you can save the castle because there's no potential idea of a Greek gift in the future. Any more questions or?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so bishop d7, bishop d3, rook c8, and then now the best move here is actually for them to take. Now bishop takes c5, and for example, now if they castle here, now we can go knight g7, and we have ideas to potentially in the future pressure this e5 pawn, or because rerouting the knight to f5 doesn't really target anything here. Then eventually, okay, right now we can't castle. So, does anyone have any questions so far or no? Okay. bishop d7. So now, since bishop d3 blocks the protection of his pawn, a more natural move is to play bishop e2. But now, if this happens, now we can go knight g7. And now in future, if they move the bishop to d3, now they'd be wasting an extra tempo. And our very clear idea is to move the knight to f5. So for example, castles, we can even take here if they have to take with the pawn, because the e5 pawn would be hanging. Now knight f5, and they're slowly running out of ways to defend this pawn. We are going to keep adding pressure. For example, bishop e3 is a bad move here, because of course we can target the b2 pawn, and we can always ruin their pawn structure, and we just keep going on with our development. Okay, so after knight f5, okay, well, if they play bishop d3, then, well, the idea is still this, but you can still play something like this. Because if they try to take and try to push, then you can just eliminate all their counterplay like this. And this looks sort of cramped, but later, since they've eliminated this key bishop, now, soon we will have the bishop. Well, right now we have the bishop here, and we will just simply keep adding on pressure, bring the rook, and push, basically.
Can I add something here? After they take on f5, and then you take back. So the tread on f5 happens here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like one like really good way to have like for like you to run over someone that doesn't know what they're doing with white. So after ef5,
e5.
Yeah, if they play a move like knight b to d2 here,
like
you have this really sneaky plan of f4 and g5, and just start running over their king side.
Yeah, because this bishop is blocked, so you can't take this pawn out. And by the time they move, now you already have your attack running.
Yeah, I figured that would be good to add here.
Can you go back a few moves? Yeah, after the bishop takes an f5.
Oh, okay, sorry. This, okay.
Yeah, and then bishop to e6.
What?
Like, once the bishop is on e6, black's bishop.
Bishop on e6.
What if white plays something like knight g5?
Knight g5 here?
Yeah.
Okay. Knight g5 you actually don't really need to worry about, because first, of course, you can just go bishop e7, and if they take, now your pawns are actually fixed. You don't worry about this.
Is that a weak pawn? Because backward pawn.
Yeah.
It's a backward pawn.
Okay, but currently, since the fly was close, they can't actually target this backward pawn currently. So it's not much of a problem. And if they have to maneuver their knight a lot just to get their knight on f4 to try attacking this.
Okay. See.
Any more questions or? Okay. So, does anyone have any more questions about this, or? Okay. Now that we've mostly covered this variation, of course, you can also ask any questions if you want any other moves covered. Now we're going to move on to the sample game from this. Okay, this game was between, sorry if I pronounce this wrong, Julian M. Hodgson and Arthur Josupal. Okay. So, bishop b7. Now, a3 basically prevents us early, but it transitions into the same setup. C takes c4, c takes c4. Now queen b6 is the same idea that we saw. And now we also see this thematic g5 break. And at any of these positions, whenever you have this specific position, where the queen on b6, the knight's on c6, putting pressure, you always want to go g5 here, trying to strip this apart. In the game, his opponent played.
And after g5, what if they just play c? Do you play h5 to continue the threat? If they play
g5?
h3.
No, because after g5, if you play h3, now after h5, you're just overextending. And the funny thing is, this is actually pinned, so this isn't really a threat. So here in the game, Black actually played a really nice tactic with knight takes d4. And after knight takes d4, now bishop c5 hits this knight and hits the pawn behind. So if the knight moves, Black will just take the pawn, and slowly he's gonna bring his bishop and maneuver his pieces to try attacking the king further. In the game, White plays bishop e3, defending this knight, and then queen d2. The rook's mainly trapped. So in the game, White's actually already losing here. To play bishop b3, and then Black takes the rook, White castles, and okay, now White's probably trying to say this isn't so simple, like your queen's basically trapped in the corner here, and you haven't castled yet. But later, when Black gets all their pieces out and gets their king to safety, they'll just win with this extra material. So in the game, 97, rook e1, which kind of just runs into a brick wall, and then knight c6 trying to trade off more material. Now, White tries to play this very nice tactic, which does win a pawn, but now Black plays bishop takes e3, and after knight g7, king f8, now White actually just, funnily enough, loses a piece for nothing, basically. So, White actually keeps trying to counterattack. It looks scary for Black here, but after knight takes e5, now this threat is defended, and the queen actually keeps defending this, and the knight's still hanging. So in the game, rook takes e3, rook c1 check. Now this knight's under attack, this knight's defending everything, this knight's under attack, king h2, rook takes b1. Now this bishop is kind of under attack, it's mostly defended right now. So, knight h5 moves the knight out of danger, and potentially goes to knight to f6 to try harassing the Black position even more. So, rook h1 check, calling the king out, king g3, and now rook h3 check is actually a very fancy move, because now after g takes h3, now it actually exposes this line for the queen to check. Queen g1, queen g2, takes, and now after this, check again, the king moves, and then just knight d7 back. And now, even though you've returned the material, now if you count, you're actually up 2 pawns here. Okay, so White reroutes the bishop here, trying to create counterplay, and Black actually allows him because, of course, you can't take due to this tactic, which just wins a piece. But now king g4 defends the knight, so now you can take, but now h6 just moves the pawn on dark squares. Now, in endgames like this, like, not now, it's not very important now, but if you can, usually you want your pawns to be on the opposite color of their bishop if there's only a bishop on the board, because you don't want their bishops attacking your pawns, of course. Okay. So, rook g6 is really interesting because takes, and then this is actually mate. So, continuing the game, takes. Now, Black just slowly defends his pawns and uses his connected passers to squeeze White out. And White can't really do anything. Here, according to this, White resigned. Does anyone have questions before we move on, or what? Okay. Okay. Oops. Now we're moving on to the classical variation. Okay, this is when Wyatt actually plays 93, which is the most common main line at master level and the most common move at amateur level, I think. Let me check. Oh, okay, my bad. So 93. Now there are many lines. We'll cover the Rubinstein later, where you would actually exchange to relieve this pressure and disallow them from ever playing e5. But for now, we're covering knight f6. So knight f6, the goal is to just add more pressure onto this pawn. Bishop g5 continues to to pin this, adding more pressure and potentially threatening e5. So here, bishop e7. Okay, not h6. Okay, h6 is actually a line. Now, I recommend this line because even though it looks like we're losing a pawn, you actually get very rapid active development. We have ideas of c5 in the future, potentially ripping open this diagonal. If they take our bishop, our line square bishop will get out. Our knight on c6 will develop the c6 and get out. And we will simply castle, and we will have a very active position with the bishop pair. So, the line continues with d takes c6, bishop takes c6, knight f3. We castle here, bishop d3, and c5, trying to rip this diagonal open. So now here, white actually has to return the pawn in order not to avoid further complications. So after bishop takes c3, doubling the pawns, knight c6, rook e1, rook f d8. The position is equal, but it's actually very hard for white to play here because we have a lot of pressure on this open file. We're going to potentially take this pawn in the future, and if they play something like rook e4, even consider something like not this because that runs into a pin. We can even consider something like stacking and adding even more pressure. But all in all, white has a very hard position to play here. Now, if you don't want to play this gambit line, you can instead play bishop e7, which simply pins the knight. Or you can play the burnt variation and continue like this, which basically becomes a Rubinstein later if it transposes. Like, for example, takes, and then you just simply keep developing. And maybe, actually, a key idea is just to go b6 and fianchetto like this, then castle. Or you can switch them around. Any questions so far? Or
I guess you should point out the existence of after in the burn d4, knight e4, bishop e7. If they take on f6, they usually take the bishop. You can also take with the pawn here instead of the bishop.
Yeah. This does damage the pawn structure, but you do get an open g file, and you can potentially play f5 to kick away the knight. And then basically follow a similar plan here. Okay, anything else? So if you don't want to play that, bishop e7 is also an okay alternative to unpin the knight. e5 is probably the most common move here. Simply add more pressure onto the center and attack this knight. Now there are two moves, knight e4 and knight fd7. Knight e4 is much more risky, but after takes, now you have this very weak pawn. So I don't recommend this. So knight fd7 is the best move. Now, the point is, because if they don't take, if they just play something like retreating, then we can actually just, I recommend playing a6 here to stop this, but you can also just play c5 because it's not a big threat right now. If they play this, it just runs into nothing. And if they play this, then you can even just take, and the pawn structure is extremely damaged. Okay, so they basically have to take, and now the common move here is f4. And before we go c5, I think everyone knows why c5 is wrong, because after knight b5, you're going to get into one of these two squares. You can't castle because the rook's trapped, obviously. And if you try defending it, the knight d6 and the king can't castle. So first, here you play a6, blocking this threat. And after knight f3, c5. Now you continue to add pressure. And they actually can't really defend it very well. For example, if they just play bishop e... So, here, the most common move and best line against this is to simply take to actually relieve the pressure from the center. Now, here I recommend just knight 6 continue developing because there's no way to save this pawn. The dark squared bishop's gone, b4 just hangs a pawn, and you can't really defend this in any other way. Queen d4 just hangs the queen, of course. So if they continue developing, knight takes c5, and now we attack the bishop. And this position is just good for white. If they simply castle, we can take the bishop, and then now we castle, and then we have a... And to break this apart in the future, we might even consider f5. Or for b5 first in order to kick this knight away. Okay, this. Okay, now if they don't play this line, a more common line is the Steinitz variation. Here, of course, this attacks our knight immediately, so we have to go knight d7 back. The most common move here is f4, which is also the best move. And then c5, attacking the center. Knight f3 defending. Knight c6, continuing to add pressure. Bishop e3 continues defending this even more. The main line here is a6, with the intention to go b5 and kick this knight away. And it will kind of develop behind that. Now, queen d2 is the most common move here, trying to castle queenside, but we still continue with our plan of b5. And if they play a3, now queen a5. And now this is enabled again because this rook would be hanging. Of course, castling queenside would also result in b5, b4 immediately, which completely shatters open their queenside. And their king will be hunted very soon. Okay, so after a3, queen a5, the best move here is d takes c5, which basically just buys time. Because we have to take here. And after bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, now this threat is open again. So for example, if they just go here, then of course we go here. We're probably going to take this pawn, open up the b file, and our position will be good from here, and we'll just castle. So, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So, another move, of course, is actually the move, another move instead of queen d2 is actually knight e2. If they play knight e2, b5, and we just continue on our plan of advancing the pawn on the queen side. So, the main idea of knight e2 is to go c3. Now we undermine this by playing b4. And we'll kind of just build behind this idea. And, like, for example, the best move here, I believe, is actually to take. But now we take on d4. And it actually does matter when they take with. Because, okay. Like, after they take, now we will play bishop takes b5 check. And if they block, then takes, and knight takes c2. We'll just bring our rooks. We'll just bring our rook and castle. Same. Does anyone have any questions? Isn't French dangerous because the king... Okay. Last minute. Isn't French dangerous because the king isn't castle in most lines? Okay, this is I see your point. But actually, even though the king isn't castled early in most lines, usually they can't punish it in any concrete way. There's no way, because in the French, usually at least the very close positions, and the rook can't really attack the king from here. And also in some lines, white themselves isn't castled too, so... Perfect opening for me because I always forget to cast. Just to ask a stupid question. What happens instead of knight d2 or queen d2? Why ignores and plays g4? Okay. So g4, of course, is a weird move because we're not even castled yet, so this is basically doing nothing. For example, if we were like castled, then this would be doing something. Then we would be in a bit of trouble because their attack would come crushing through. Like, they could take, develop their bishop and open the F file, and they could keep pushing their pawns. But if they play something like, if they play g4, pretty sure we can just continue with our plan of b5, right? Yeah. And their knight has to go back. Then we just take here, and now their center is just failing to hold up. Like, e5, f5. Yeah. I think bishop h4 check also makes why not getting castled. Bishop h4 check actually, it takes too long. Setting this idea up actually takes too long because we want to focus on our idea of going b5 and advancing on the queen side. It's like, if we pour our heart out into playing this, they can actually go king f1, and surprisingly enough, they're mostly fine here. Yeah. It's not losing, but it's also not very good for white. But there's no easy way to punish it. For example, if we go f6 immediately, then of course that's just oh my bad, that just hangs a bishop. Okay. I'm gonna show myself that. I'm gonna look at the chat real quick. And also French is he's black and hiding. Okay, does anyone else have any questions so far? No? Okay. Now that we've covered the Steinitz and classical variation, now let's move on to a game between Sergei Karyakin and Hikaru Nakamura. So, things like this. And in this game, they actually played a Steinitz. So here, everything is normal. And here, Karachi delays the move a6 to try castling quicker. This is playable, but I like just playing a6 immediately because you usually want to get this as fast as possible to create more counterplay. So in the game, bishop b7, queen d2, white is trying to castle queenside here. Now a6. Now you are basically daring white to castle because if they do this, now we are threatening b4, in which we will play queen a5 after, and our attack will be very fast. So white actually delays castling in the game, and they take first to relieve pressure on the center. Hikaru takes with knight here. Hikaru takes with the knight here. Doesn't want... Wait. Both lines are fine, but Hikaru chooses to take with the knight, possibly to disallow bishop d3. White decides to go bishop d3 anyways. Hikaru trades the light squared bishop. The queen takes, and now Hikaru plays this f6 move. In types of positions where the light squared bishop is not here, you can usually get away with this move to open up the center even further, and when you castle, you will use the f file. Without this light squared bishop, this weakening of the light squares does not really mean much unless you play something like h6, which is a horrible move, allowing them to check, and you can't castle anymore. So in the game, f6, of course, if you take, then okay. If white doesn't take, for example, if they just castle, then you can just simply take, and after castle, this pawn is very weak, and Hikaru would likely continue with his idea of b5. Okay, in the game, he takes to avoid Hikaru approaching the idea, and now bishop takes f6. Now this bishop is staring at the queen side. Sergei Karyakin chooses to castle queen side anyways. Now knight b4 hits the queen retreats, and now queen a5. Now this is actually becoming a very big problem for white. This knight on c3 is under attack, and we are threatening the a2 pawn with it. And of course, behind that is the b2 pawn, which is a flesh of the position in white's queen side. So white notices this immediately, trying to trade off dark squared bishops. Now knight takes e2, of course. Now white is up a pawn. Black is up a pawn. So knight takes a2, queen takes a2. Black is now threatening checkmate. So we see here that ever since white castled queenside, things will basically start going downhill for them. Because we have a lot of pressure here already. This a2 pawn is attacked, and it can't do anything to defend every threat. So takes. Hikaru takes with a g pawn, which is very interesting, but he's Hikaru, I guess. So knight d4, bishop d7, trying to bring the rook to the c file. Queen c7, attempting to create more counterplay, attack the bishop and attack the b pawn. Hikaru just gives a check, and now queen takes b2. This bishop cannot be taken because this knight will hang. And then Sergey goes king e2 to defend this. Hikaru gives a check. If you take, then this pawn will be very weak. And of course, you can invade like this. Use the other rook to go to the c file. And Black's king is actually not easy to attack because the g file is not open. So king f2. Now Sergey is trying to basically hide his king, sort of. Like, his idea is to bring the rook, then hide his king, and if he gets his king here, then he'll actually have a fine position. But Hikaru, not allowing that, continues attacking, obviously. Rook a c8, putting more pressure. Queen d6. Now e5. Now we see the idea behind f6. Now, these two pieces are under attack. The knight's under attack, and in the game, Sergey took the pawn. Now the king on h8 is very safe. Knight takes b5, rook takes c2 check, and the position is crumbling very fast. King g1. Now, instead of taking the knight, Hikaru first plays this move, and after g3, and then Hikaru likely took the knight here, he went on to win this game very soon. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the exchange? Let me check chat. Why not pawn takes on e5 instead of taking bishop? Which move? Oh, looks like. Okay. Alright. Now let's move on to the exchange variation, bro. Okay. So e4, this is the same French. Now, many people will play the exchange to try being drawish. Now, there is actually a line in which black can actually play for a win. The most common line to play is just knight f6, but this usually leads to very symmetrical, boring drawish positions after you basically just copy all the moves of white. For example, like this, castles, or even if they pin, you also pin. So knight c6 breaks the symmetry immediately and applies pressure on the d4 pawn. Now they can always go c3 for now, and this pawn will be completely safe. But here, bishop d3, attempting to just castle and develop the light square bishop. Now first we go bishop d6, aiming at this king side, castles, and now a very important move here is knight e7, because they no longer have this check when you develop the knight like this. Now, of course, our idea is actually not to castle kingside, because that would result in a very devastating attack with the Greek gift. And so we play this. Now we are trying to go bishop g4 here. So c3 solidifies that, and now bishop g4. Now we pin this knight, and h. Yeah. But okay. Yeah, this actually doesn't work. Sorry. But if you castle here, of course, like the main idea of why playing the exchange is usually to get in the drawish, boring positions. So instead of castling, which would be on the same side as them, we want to actually race the game. So see here, we are trying to in the future play queen d7 if they don't kick the bishop. If they just play this, we can always play queen d7, castle, and we will go f6, g5, knight g6, and continue our attack. And if they ever go h3, that actually creates a hook after we can slide our bishop back. For example, like here or here, and go g4. And open up the g file, and then we bring in our knight too. Okay. c3, bishop d4. Now, h3 is a common move attacking the bishop. Now we just maintain the pin here. And after rook e1, queen d7, queen d7, knight bd2, f6, preparing to play this. Now here, we are preparing to castle. You can castle on either side, but of course, if you don't want to get into a drawish boring position, you can just castle queenside, go g5, and just continue the same idea. This pawn move actually slightly weakens the king because g5, g4 would immediately rip open the position. Are there any questions before I... Let me look in chat. We love our drawish boring positions at pawn. Yes, yes. Okay. If you want to get into a drawing boring position, then of course you can play knight of 6, bishop d3, bishop, yeah, at pawn. Isn't bishop g4 before knight e7 also playable? Like right here, yes or no? Okay, yeah, it should be playable, but if you play this, yeah, you can actually interchange the two moves. Bishop g4 should still be perfectly fine here, because if they give this check, then you would just move here. You can interchange the two. I'd still like knight g7 first, because it just feels safer. Like blocking the check, this potential check immediately. Okay, they can play h3 to stop h4 ideas. Well, if they play h3, then yeah, you don't always know where your bishop wants to go immediately, as Big Mac X said. Like, you don't always know where to go. And if they like here, if they play h3, then they're actually just wasting time. And we can potentially play something like bishop f5 to trade off. Takes. It looks like they're getting something here. But here, we can actually just continue our plan of castling. Yeah. And of course, you can castle kingside, which is much safer. And it keeps the game more static if you don't want to race immediately. Okay. Any more questions? I'll check chat real quick. Bishop f5, yeah. Castles, then bishop f5 looks better. Yeah. Bishop f5 can trade a light square bishop buff. Coach Vim Hits, what was your question? What French defense players games would you recommend studying? There's actually a lot of people who play the French. You can study any player, but personally, okay, you can study Anish Gary's game because I know he used to play the French a lot, and yeah, according to Donna G, you can just go to the Lichess database and see a bunch of French players' games. So, are there any more questions before I move on? Like what if they play a different move, like knight bd2 or something, or bishop e3? Okay. One question is this opening? Yes, this opening is going to be recorded. I think. Hopefully the footage doesn't get corrupted. Okay. Now, of course, if you want to play the drawish variation, you can just play into this knight f6, bishop d. Okay, let me fix my thing real quick. Bishop d3, bishop d6, both sides castle, bishop c5, bishop c4, and this is completely symmetrical and will likely be a draw. If you look at the database here, not Lichess Masters. Yeah, this is an 83% draw rate. Yeah. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions before we move on to the 2 sample games here? I actually put 2. The first one is to show that the French defense isn't always drawish, and the second is showing the line I just covered. This line, where you castle queenside to start an attack. Any questions or no? Okay. Okay. Alright, let's move on to the first game played between Mikhail Gurevich and Nigel Short. Okay.
Hey, can I just add the context here real quick for this?
Yeah.
This is the last round of the interzonal tournament, which the winner of that would go to the candidates tournaments. And then white only needed a draw to clinch the spot, and black needed to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the context, Big Mac X. Okay, so, yeah, in this game, d4 is actually played first, and then Nigel played e6, and after e4, this just transfers back to the normal French. So, if they play e4, d4, it doesn't really matter the move order. Now, a lot of masters, I'm pretty sure, will play c4 here, and then this just becomes a queen's gambit, but we're not covering that. So, e4 takes, exchange variation takes, and knight f3. And Nigel actually plays a line I didn't cover, but is still absolutely fine to play, with bishop c4 pinning the knight immediately. Yeah, this kind of avoids the symmetrical knight f6, and is sort of better to play for a win. In the game, Mikhail plays h3, caking the bishop. He plays bishop h5, maintaining the pin. Bishop e2, unpinning, and now bishop d6 continues to develop the bishop, and kind of played this idea with knight e7, instead of choosing to develop the bishop knight in the normal way. Chooses to trade immediately, and after bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, now this is a very big threat, so knight e7 defends it immediately. Both sides castle, bishop f4 developing the bishop. Now rook e8, putting this rook on the open file. Now, to avoid the potential discovered attacks, like knight g6, and this would be a pin, and we would likely win a pawn, or even play f6. If they don't do anything, then win the knight. So, I might play queen g4 here. Now here, Nigel decided to trade off the bishops, deciding this knight was a bit too active and could cause trouble to his position later. So takes, this is a big threat. Nigel defends it with knight g6, block the threat, counterattacking the bishop. Now, of course, white doesn't want to lose the bishop and a pawn for a knight, so he retreats to g3. And now knight d7 has his plan of going to f6, and potentially going to this e4 square in the future. White also develops normally, with knight d2 trying to re-maneuver here. Knight f6 continues with the plan. Now queen f3, c6, adding on more protection to this pawn before he continues with his plan. And after queen b3, attempting to attack this pawn, Nigel offers a trade of queens. Now, some people may think this looks bad, but this is actually a perfectly fine pawn structure, because it's actually not very easy to attack. Because if they just play this, well, this is just a one mover, b5, and now these pawns are actually very excellent, and we have the open a file. Yeah. Takes. White plays a3 here, so that this pawn is no longer a big problem, and white can move the rook in the future. And now knight e4 after a3, occupying the square. And white pretty much has no choice. You'll either take this bishop to double the pawns, or take this knight. So white's hand is forced to take this knight. Rook takes e4, and now Nigel is planning to stack up. So Now here, Mikhail decides not to offer a trade, because of course he would just get hit by this, and yeah. So why don't you defend? Oh yeah, and my bad. Of course, this pawn is also hanging. So why defends it like this? And why not with the other rook? This rook is basically just stuck in after. So this position is actually very bad because like there's plans like f5 and just kind of ring the king and maybe blocking this bishop out. And White's position is very bad here because he can't really move anything. And we can even go to the second rank and gobble the pawns. Okay, so going back, he defends with this rook. Now Miguel Short plays b5, continuing to control these two squares. And of course, this is no longer a threat anymore. And most of Nagel's pawns, as you can see here, as you discussed earlier, are now on light squares. There is only one pawn that is on the same color as the bishop, but that bishop can't really target this pawn anytime soon. It can't go here. It can't go like this, of course. And it's actually blocked by most of its own pawns. So this bishop's actually not very good. Well, because it's aiming at nothing. So in the game, he goes king f1. Now, the point is you're blocking this square, and Nigel plays f6, aiming to go king f7 potentially in the future, making room for his king. And also another idea, like this king here, like this just also avoids any potential back rank issues, which won't happen anytime soon anyways, but just in case. It's always a good precaution measure. So here, Mikhail retreats to e6. Now rook e1 trade offers to trade the rooks because now this d4 pawn's no longer under attack. And now king f7 defends this rook. Mikhail takes, of course taking. Now rook e1 check occupies the open file, controlling these three squares so white can not invade anytime soon. And now king e2 tries to bring the king over. Now, h5. This move is basically aiming to kick the bishop, and now the king goes to d3. So h4 kicks the bishop, bishop h2. The bishop basically had no other move. It would just run to the pawn here.
There's so also knight f4 too.
Yeah.
There's also knight f4 threatened.
Exactly. So you have to stay on this diagonal. And after knight e7 here, trying to reroute the knight like something like this. Bishop f4 now, trying to maybe reroute the bishop to a better square. Now knight f5. Nigel continues with his plan. Bishop d2. He tries rerouting the bishop. And now, simply b6 here. With the idea to go c5, which he plays the following move after rook e2. And then c5. And as you see here, black is actually mostly controlling the game. Because White's bishop is mostly out of play. And we are trying to undouble our pawns here. And we are actually running faster with our pawns on the queen side. We can always go here in the future. They can't push any kingside pawns except for this one. And also, they can't really push any queenside pawns without creating too much of a change. Like if c3, then their bishop will just be out of the game forever. So bishop e3, continuing by defending this pawn, hoping that Nigel trades, which would not be a horrible move, but the position would likely be much more playable because you don't want to trade your good knight for this bad bishop. So e4 now, Nigel is just going for it, advancing all his queenside pawns and trying to create a passer. You cannot take because it allows too much activity, and this is a check too. So you can't even take this pawn. So a takes b4. Now, instead of taking the pawn, which isn't losing immediately, but now these pawns are now massive targets because they can't move. Well, this pawn can move, but this pawn will likely be dead in the future. So Nigel actually plays a very instructive move. Instead of taking the pawn immediately, because this pawn is very bad, it's likely going to die in the future, c4 check is actually a very common move here. Instead of taking the pawn and ruin our structure, Nigel chooses to keep its structure and drive the king away. So after this, knight d6 follows up with the idea of going here and invading on the second ring. So rook e1 here, trying to stop this infiltration. Now rook a4. Now knight b5 check just immediately comes with the threat of taking this pawn. Now white, as you can see here, white is actually slowly running out of moves. He has no choice but to go back to d2. If he doesn't, then you just follow up with his check and you take the pawn anyways. King d2, rook takes b4. Now rook e1 tries to create counterplay, but now after rook takes b2, rook a7 check. Now it looks like white's actually getting in and creating counterplay. But now b5, and now in the game, Nigel follows up with b4, completely ignoring this pawn. And the reason is b3, and we will get two very strong passers after this. So king c1, c3 defending, bishop takes h4. After knight f5, Nigel actually went on to win this game. Now, this looks dangerous because white has this passed pawn. After something like bishop f2, we can always actually set up this very nice idea of mating that. Now, if rook a2 immediately, then they'll just go here, and you don't want to repeat in this position, because, or rook's, oh my god. Okay, any questions? Anyone have any questions? In chat? Or voice? Rooks? Okay. Alright, don't flame me for that too long, okay? Okay, next sample game covers the variation I discussed earlier with knight c6, bishop d6, knight ge7. Okay, so just like the last game, this is an exchange. Here, bishop d3 first. These two moves are actually very interchangeable. They usually lead to the same positions. Now, knight c6, immediately attacking the pawn. c3 defends it. The game continues on with bishop d6, knight g7, castles, and now bishop d4 here, causing white lots of trouble. Now, h3 here, it can be playable, but black will likely just move back and keep this pin on. Yeah, knight b2, you just continue with your plan. You go like this. Okay. In the game, Black actually plays bishop g5 here, pinning this knight. But in the game, you can just ignore this and play queen d7. Okay, in the game you played queen d7, f6 is also a good move. Then you play queen d7. The move order doesn't really matter that much. Queen d7, knight bd2, defending this knight so the queen could potentially move. And after f6, bishop h4, now black finally castles queenside. Now he can play bishop g5 in the future and continue his attack. Now after bishop g3, the move Sherlong Lee played in the game, knight g6 is actually a slight inaccuracy. Does anyone know why? No. It's not because you can take this knight. Taking this knight would be awful because you open up the H file. The reason why is you are actually blocking your G pawn. You want to advance this first, then go knight G5, knight G6. Because you don't want to block your G pawn, which can help attack in the future if they create this hook for you. So knight G6 is actually not a good move. White exchanges, trying to relieve pressure. Queen takes D6. Now, G3 here looks... okay, I don't really get G3. G3 likely was trying to stop the idea of knight F4 and knight H4 in the future, adding more pressure. Now, Black tries to reroute his other knight. Like, potentially, he could go here. Yeah, that pawn. Pawn hook for Black's pawn storm, right? Yeah, G3 is a very big hook. And if they play H3, that would also be a very big hook. Like, hooks are very important in attacking. Like, when they have their pawns like this, it's actually very hard to create a good attack. You will require multiple moves, and even when you get there, they can always take, and they close it up. But when they have a hook, now you can open up the position immediately. Like, for example, G3, which was played in the game, like you can't play this right now because this knight's hanging. So here, this knight's actually also serving another role, defending this knight, and potentially h5 in the future, h4, to crush open the position of the king side. Here, white continues his development and unpins the knight with queen c2. And now black actually plays a very funny move here with knight f8. The point is, now h5 no longer hangs the knight, and you can also potentially go here in the future, and maybe here. And now, of course, you can also go g5, which black should have done earlier, but now it's good too. So rook f1, simply developing the rook to the open file. g5 now, continuing the attack. a4, white has to strike back. Because if they don't strike back, if they just play something like simple, like maybe here, which does absolutely nothing, or maybe this, then you can just play h5 and continue the attack. And let me check the email. Okay, it's not horrible, but white usually wants to strike back immediately if they don't want black to just play this idea on the spot. After a4, now okay, this minute. Okay, now black brings the knight back to g6 because now this g-pawn's here. Black's actually made multiple moves with this knight, which of course is why, of course, you should put g5 immediately. But in the game, yeah, after this pawn's on g5, now black tries bringing his rook, also providing defense for the knight. So h5, which he later played in the game, can be possible. Now, b5, trying to go a5 and push even further and open up the a file and c file potentially. Now h5, a5, and h4, and black's attack is crushing through. Now, okay, what? This is actually defendable for white, but it's very hard because if you see our pawns here, we have not made any weaknesses, no hooks, and nothing like that. So basically, they can't really attack as well. They could sack, but then, of course, if they have to sack to open up, then that wouldn't be very good sometimes. Let me check my chat real quick. So any questions? Same again. Okay, yeah, I don't see any questions right now. If you have a question and you don't want to use your voice, which is perfectly fine, just ask in chat and ping me. Okay. Yes. Black's attack is usually faster, right? Yes. Whenever one side has the hook, usually the attack. Whenever one side has a hook, usually the other side's attack will be faster. Usually. Now, the h3 hook and g3 hook don't really matter, but if you have a hook, usually you can start an attack on that side a lot faster. Nearing the end of the game before something weird happened. The rest of the game didn't load. What if white somehow makes your attack dangerous? Yeah. Like, why can't just meet? Okay. Oh yeah, and like black actually has this crazy rook takes g3. I didn't see that immediately, of course. I'm human too. Yeah. Okay. Wait, let me just see this question. Rook takes g3 is a threat. Yeah, right. Rook h3, c5. C5 wasn't played. For some reason, the game ended here. But you're threatening this, you can stack, and black's attack is crushing through much faster. So you cannot do anything, because of course, rook takes g3, and the position just rips apart, basically. So white cannot continue their attack normally, and they have to be the defender. And usually, when you're in an attacking position, mostly like 80% of the time, the attacker is almost always the winner. It's only -1, it's not losing out pawn. Okay, here, you have to find knight f1 here to guard, which he likely found in the game, but yeah. Okay, e6. It's only minus 1.4, which you could say is not a big deal. Yeah, this is just very awkward for white. And if they go b6, you can actually just go here, actually. Funnily enough, any move that white tries to make here to make a breakthrough, like a6, can just run into this. Now, you don't play this immediately. You play this later. Step, here, and then you actually take this, sacking the rook once again, because that's just a free knight. See what this was drawing. -1 is losing. -1 isn't completely losing. These people don't seem very good. This is a titled game. Okay. Anyone have any more questions? What? Anyone? White can sack their bishop. What? Okay. Here, I'm assuming you were referring to this, like this, but this is actually not enough. This is not enough because their pieces are not in any condition, and white himself is already under a major attack. If you look at an eval here, okay, they have to find queen d3, but after, you can actually even ignore this and play king d7 and run your king. And soon enough, once black actually gets their king to the king side, you'll actually just be winning up a piece. Yeah, the bishop sack doesn't really work. Okay. Anyone else have any more questions before we go on? Dominic a G. What if they break with c4? Okay, that happened in the game. But here you see h63, and now black creates this very big threat. And they've just trying to sack the rooks. Now, objectively speaking, according to the engine, white is better here, but it's actually kind of hard to play. Because, of course, black has tons of ideas. Right now, rook h8 doesn't work because you hang a knight. But there are a lot of things you have to watch out for. Like, this knight is kind of weak. Maybe even some crazy sacrifice like knight h4 here could work in the future. Yeah, white's position is very bad to play here. Even though, objectively speaking, it's +1. Wait, white resigned here? Don't blink. Yeah, it was probably an issue. Don't blame me for that. Blame, who for that? Yeah, white didn't actually resign here. But for some reason, the full game wasn't uploaded. These positions are too crazy to resign unless there's man on board. Okay. So, white probably didn't resign here. If they did, then, well, I don't know. It was likely most likely they played something like this and allowed rook takes d3, and then maybe later they resigned. Because resigning in this position, yes, you are correct, Big Mac X. It is very crazy to resign in these types of positions. Even though it looks very bad, of course, you can always defend the attack. Like, knight f1 is the move. This looks like it hangs a knight. But after c5, this attack is at... Now white is actually the one crashing through. And most of black's attack is stopped by this knight on f1. Now, the knight on f1 and knight on f8 are actually very key defenders if you can place them on those squares. They defend this, they defend the g3 square. Basically, everything is defended by the knight on f1. And it's not very easy to eliminate. So, yeah. Any more questions? Air FM and GM, why are they so bad? Please no egotism. Okay, I'm just gonna move on. Does anyone have questions or no? Alright. Alright, this is the two knights variation. Ready. E4, E6, knight f3, D5, knight C3. Okay, there are two things to play here. In master games, masters usually like to play knight f6. They like to bait this E5 move so they can pressure the center later. After d4, c5. Now this is looking like a lot of defense. We are attacking the center, of course. Knight e2. Okay, knight e2 continues to defend it. Of course, if they go bishop d3, then c takes d4, and then that's just a free pawn. Yeah, they can't do that.
Yeah, this is just like a bad classical variation for white.
Yeah, this is just the worst classical variation for white with the two knights. I'm not sure I need to cover, but like, just so someone wouldn't nag me about it. Knight e2. Now, knight c6. Okay, bishop e7 and knight c6 are interchangeable usually. c3, knight c6. Okay, let's just do this. Knight c6. And a lot of people actually like to take in some positions. I think it was earlier. Yeah, it was earlier. Takes. You go knight c6 attacking this pawn first. Like, you can take immediately, but after bishop f4, bishop takes c5. There are many ideas here. Yeah, you see bishop d3. Now, f6 here, it looks kind of scary, but there's not really any checks. They have to move their knight, and if they do, you can just get out of danger. Like, if they try this, you can castle, and you can just block off. Yeah. You can just block off the bishop. And if they take, well, now you have to open that file, and then can you go back to exchange instead of bishop? Okay, I'll go back to exchange as per request. So where? Can you tell me when to... So you're saying instead of bishop d3 here, what if they play knight c3? Yeah, you're knight c3? Yeah. Okay. Here, if knight c3, you can actually play bishop b4 here and just pin the knight. And if they go a3, then you just go back. And now you actually just... And now this actually kind of helped you. It's kind of funny because they're supposed to be kicking your bishop away, but now your bishop's just on a good diagonal. And you're continuing the pressure. And it basically just helped you out of the opening. And you can kind of play like this. Anything else you want to ask? So you gave yourself a good night. You don't want to block the... Yeah. Also, you don't want to block the c-pawn too. Like c3. Now, let's go back to the two knights variation. Okay, so, of course, what? Yeah. What if they play c4 directly? Hey, where? Like, here? Here or what? There? Yeah, c4, I know, okay. I know this is an actual line in the Hero Con where it's called the pan-off, but here, it's not the same. You can just go knight f6 here, and again, you don't want to move your pawn like this, because, of course, yeah. Because after c4, now, of course, this pawn becomes even weaker. c3 is no longer able, the pawn can no longer solidify it because it's already moved too far. You just go knight f6, they play something like this, and you keep developing. It's sort of like a Queen's Gambit, and then you just castle, and you bring your rook. And you go knight c6, and you target the spawn. Or, I don't know how to play against IQP. Against IQP position, if they just take here, okay, this is actually very instructive, because IQP can occur in a lot of openings, like the Alapin, the Panov, and of course this, if anyone plays it. And the IQP, usually the more minors you trade off, the better it'll be in an endgame. Because the side with the IQP usually wants to attack a lot, since they have the IQP, and it supports central squares like this. So, like, if some position like this somehow happens, for example, like where you trade a bunch of pieces and stuff, like, of course this won't happen in a real game. Takes. Okay, here there's already no IQP. You actually don't want to allow them to do this. Here you can actually just develop. If they take. Now there's no more knight to actually kick your queen out. And also you want to block the IQP from pushing, usually. Yeah. What Coach Gap said. Okay, are we good to move on now? Okay. Alright, back to the two knights. I've already covered this version. There's also a slightly more aggressive version with d4, taking the knight away immediately. And a point is after 92, now c5. Now if they try breaking this apart, now we can target this pawn. So d3, we will just continue our development here. Okay, I just got a notification, what? And White's position is actually very cramped. They have to play g3 here and develop like this. But the bishop will just be blocked on the diagonal. For example, we can even try playing e5 in the future if they want to open their bishop. Does anyone have any questions? Alright, let's move on. Okay, now this is the sample game for the two knights variation. d4, e6, of course, it transfers to the French defense. d5, knight to3, knight f6, e5. Okay, yeah, this is just the two knights now. c5, now in the game, d takes c5, knight to6, trying to grab this pawn first, bishop f4, and now black actually plays a very interesting move, a6. Now the point is kind of to stop anything from getting on the square like the bishop or knight, which could become a problem. But for instance, this pawn's still dead, so you can't absolutely play a6. Who in the right mind would gain? Who in the right mind would take on c5? And okay, yeah, I know it sounds natural, but funnily enough, this is the most played move to relieve pressure on the center early. But funnily enough, it looks bad, and you might question why masters play this. But if you just keep trying to just develop, then you just keep pressuring. And white wants to eliminate the pressure on the center early. If the pressure overloads on the center too much, then eventually you'll be able to just capture a pawn. Like in the advance we covered earlier. Does that answer your question, or? Yeah. Straight off your grief. Moving on. Here, thanks. Knight c5. If bishop's under attack, castles. Black focuses on castling first themselves. Queen d2, developing the queen, attempting to bring their rooks. It allows the rooks to connect, basically. Castles a3. Now, the plan is likely to kick this knight away, but I think white. Oh yeah, white a3 is fine, but I think white should just focus on developing, in my opinion. But a3 now black also played black plays f5 here, and the point of f5 is this one's from my phone. The point of f5 is you basically block the bishop off, and of course you can trade this immediately, but in the game he decides to do it like this. And now white's hand is basically forced. If they play a random move, this bishop will be horrible forever, basically. And slowly, you can just push and develop behind this. So in the game, white is basically forced to take en passant, which allows black to use the open f file. Bishop takes f6. This bishop is now extremely active because all the center pawns are gone, as you can see here. And of course, we're threatening to play e5, so white has to stop that. Now queen b6 attacking this pawn. Bishop d6 attacking our rook and counterattacking. Now knight takes d3 first. We hit the rook. They have to take. Here, white decides to take with the c pawn in order to guard this rook. Guard the pawn. Rook d8 attacks the bishop. And now you see the bishop has to move back. So White's bishop d6 move was actually very short-lived, because after this, now they basically just wasted the tempo. After bishop d7, now the idea is just to go rook c8 and continue developing. Not okay. Bishop d7, knight e5, still blocking this pawn. Trade, a bunch of trade happened. So now, after this, rook a c8, continuing development, and Black's positions is already very good here. Of course, many times again and again, you will see that White has his IQP again. There's always this IQP in several openings, like I discussed earlier, the Alpin, Panoff, etc. So, okay. Now, Black's bishop is still kind of bad, but for the meantime, they can't really do... For the meantime, it's not really a big problem for White. I'm in Black. Like, rook a c8, you can occupy the open file. You also have the open f file to potentially attack in the future. And the game just goes on. Both sides mostly shuffle around. And bishop e8 is a very nice move trying to activate the bishop. Knight e3 here. Now, Black now blocks the IQP. Offers a trade. And now, offering a trade here is actually pretty bad for White. Because again, you don't want to trade any pieces. You don't want to get into an endgame without queens when there's this IQP here. The more minors you trade, and of course trading the queen and the minors often lead to this IQP becoming weaker and weaker. Because in order to use the full power of this IQP, usually you don't want to trade queens. If you get into an endgame, then this IQP is just going to get weaker until it has no use and only serves as a weakness. So here, Black attacks this pawn. G3 kicks away the rook. Rook f6, adding some defense to this pawn. Knight d4. Bishop takes d3. And now Black's already up a pawn, but it's short-lived. That's rook takes e6. Rook c4 attacking the knight and this pawn. Rook e8. Now it looks like White's getting some counterplay, but rook f8 just shuts it all down. And we see here, yeah, soon. Now Black is already up a pawn. He has his outside pass pawn, and Black is actually completely winning here. Rook takes b2, a5, knight c7, a4, and this position, yes, a few more moves later, White resigns. Yeah, this pawn's hanging. There's a kind of a web around the king. White can't do anything here. Okay, any questions before we move on? Let me check chat. On king g1. When? Hi. Okay. King g1, where? Oh, here? Right here? Okay. Well, king g... Well, if they don't play rook e1, instead play like... If they just play king g1, then I'm pretty sure you just go bishop f3 and kind of block all their progress. And they have basically 0 moves. Yeah. It's -4 here. King g1 just completely paralyzes their position after bishop f3 prevents the f-pawn from ever moving again. So, any more questions? Okay. Now, let's move on to the Rubinstein. And, okay. Okay, so e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3. And here, instead of knight f6, another... this is the Rubinstein. This is basically when, instead of playing the more popular-ish move, knight f6, to kind of bait them into playing this and getting the attack on the center is to just relieve the central pressure immediately, and this usually leads to some more active piece play. And a very common idea you will see in a Rubinstein is that because this bishop is bad, usually you will play b6 in the future and develop it like this. So after knight takes c4, knight d7 here is actually a very common idea. Like, almost always you will see people playing this. The reason why is after knight f3, you can take with the knight after the exchange. Bishop d3, okay. If they just play knight f3, of course. Takes bishop d3. c5 just completely tries to take this pawn. They have to exchange, otherwise, of course, if this, not that, sorry. This, you can probably just take, and again, IQP. Yeah. After bishop d6, castles again. This knight is a very nice defender here. There's no Greek gift. And actually b6 here. And black will actually be the one attacking. I know how to... Okay. Right. After bishop d3, again, c5. You'll play c5 almost like no matter what, usually. Wait, watch so much. Bishop d3, now f6. If they go c3 here, okay. Bishop b7 is fine. I'm pretty sure you could just take here and then go knight f6 and you attack this bishop and gain tempo. If they move here, now they're no longer on the diagonal. They're pressuring this, but of course you don't want... Isn't b6 too weakening at pawn, or you mean after you castle? Where? Show me where. Like here. Okay. Like where? Here? Right here. I can't see it from here. What you got? Right here? Wait, I'm lagging a bit. Okay. Yeah, I meant after you castle here. Because b6, I mean, like, it has a very simple idea. You just want to develop the bishop and fianchetto along the diagonal. Here, I think. Are you gonna cover bishop d3? Yeah, I'm covering that right now. Bishop d3. Of course, the best move is just exchange. A common move like this, and c5 again. And it just transposes it into the thing I covered earlier. Okay. Any other? No, the line like e4, e6, d4, bishop d3. Yeah, I'll cover that in the and I'll cover some sidelines later. Okay. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the sample game? You can just ask any questions. I don't care. No, sir. You don't. Okay. You don't need to call me sir, but okay. I'll wait for Coach Gap to finish typing real quick. Pawns are cool. Thank you very much. Okay, now this game was between Sir Vishianand, I'm not going to pronounce his full name, and Vadim Milov. So e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and then takes, it becomes a rumor sign, knight c4, knight d7. Vishy plays bishop d3 in this game, knight cf6, and now he actually plays a very interesting move, which is queen e2. Now, immediately, black decides to strike at the center pawn. After defense, c takes d4, and then white actually castles first. And then after knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, knight g5 attacking the bishop. Now, white actually ignores this and plays rook d1, adding more pressure. And black decides to just play bishop b7, simply trying the castle here. And later he can take this bishop in exchange. And after knight takes d4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, castles. There are actually no discovered attacks, funny enough, because this rook is hanging. Yeah, if the king was anywhere on like g7 or f8, then this would work. But there's no check with it. So after bishop f4, now this rook's defended. So now when the queen and rook are on the same line, usually you want to move on out of the way unless the rook's like undefended. So after bishop f4, since the rooks are connected, black plays queen b6, now putting pressure on his pawn. Now, you might not take right away because it would allow for white to get a lot of counterplay, as the b pawn is commonly referred to as a poison pawn. So a4 attempts to joy the queen out of its place, out of its socket. So bishop d7, a5, kicking the queen, a6, queen a6. In the future, black will play rook c8. Now, c4 actually gambits a pawn. I don't know what the plan behind this is, but queen takes c4, and you take this pawn now. Okay, now since these two bishops are hanging, queen c8 is pretty much forced. Any other move would probably, if you play this is kind of passive. So queen c8 attempts to get to an endgame, and an endgame is actually very good for black here because you have the bishop pair. Usually you don't want to trade the bishop pair off ever, unless it's for a good reason. So, but now a6. Now white is saying, if you take my queen, I'm going to get this really strong pawn, and I'm going to take, and I'm just going to be winning from there. So queen 8 completely avoids that trade. Now, knight f5, attacking this. Now actually it looks like black's position is falling apart. After e takes f5, rook takes d7, bishop c5. Black's position does look paralyzed in the back rank, but later after rook c1, queen e2, now we actually see the importance of the back rank. Because now, even though this bishop's under attack, everyone says bishop pair is good. I don't really know how to use it. Okay, I can't really cover that right now, but in the bishop pair, you usually want to move them to their most active squares and use their key bishop. The key bishop is the bishop that your opponent doesn't have. Like you have a dark square bishop, but your opponent has a dark square bishop. You want to activate your key bishop usually, because they can't use their bishop to fight against your key bishop, because bishops can't just do this. Bishops can't move the squares of their opposite colors. So you want to open up the position usually, speed up your attack when you have the bishop pair, and use your key bishop. Hopefully that helps a bit. I can't really cover too much right now because I'm giving a lesson on French. Okay, rook d7, bishop c5, creating counterattack. Rook c1, queen e2. Now, rook d2, queen e6. Again, this cannot be taken. Queen d5 here, trying to trade. Bishop e6, moving the queen out of danger. Queen takes e6. Yes, and now actually, white has helped black undouble their pawns. Oh, not this again. This is okay. Rook d7, getting on a second rank. Rook a c8. Rook b7. Rook takes c1 check. Yeah, Vichy blunders this, sadly enough. There's no way to stop this threat without blundering back rank mate. So in this position, Vichy and on resigned. Harder. This is why Gab is a dumb new boy. Are there any questions? All right. Coach Gab? Okay. Any questions or? probably one of the most anticipated variations, which is the Whenever. Okay, oops, not again. Alright, so the Whenever is also in the 93 variation, and it's when you play this bishop before, depending on the knight. The idea is that usually you will trade this bishop off, and you will just get a... Okay, e5 is the main line here. I'll cover the sidelines in the future, like, for example, bishop d2 or a3, or even knight e2. But e5 is the main line, c5 attacking this pawn. I gotta go, but good luck, pawn. Okay. You said to keep the bishop here at pawn. Well, this is the... Okay, but when both sides have the bishop pair... Yeah, you don't really need to keep it when both sides have the bishop pair. Like... Also, this is opening theory. So after a3, of course, your hand's forced. You take 97 here, with ideas of potentially going here and pressing more, and also castling. Knight of 3 is the most common move. And now, there are many things you can play. You can play like this. You can play queen a5. But the move I'm going to cover is actually b6. In the Whenever, this big... Okay, in every variation, bishop's horrible, but in the Whenever, you usually have a very nice, clear plan to just trade off the light squared bishop. Because the light squared bishop in a Whenever is much better than black's light squared bishop in the Whenever. Okay. So defending bishop a6 here, they don't really have any nice way to stop this. So after a4, why don't you use this idea, advanced EO idea? Okay. The reason we don't use this in the EO variation is good. Okay, let me just go back real quick. Sorry for backtracking. Yeah, the reason we don't use this is because, like, our knight's already on c6 here, so we're already doing nothing. And if we just do this, well, you want to pressure the center when they play the advanced variation. So, yeah. Like, this is playable. It's not horrible, but why would just get a very nice center very fast if you don't pressure as soon as possible? Like, in the Whenever, you can kind of disregard the center because they have double pawns, and you can always pressure it later. Okay. Alright, so knight of 3, b6, trying to trade off the bishop. Now, if they play something like bishop d3 here, then of course this forces a trade of the bishops. If they castle, for example, takes, and then just castles here. And potentially you can even just fully close the position with c4. Okay. After 97, knight of 3, e6. If they try deferring your plan with bishop e5 check, then we'll just go to d7. If they go back, now we can no longer trade off, but now we'll actually solidify our bishop here on a4. And White actually has a lot of trouble kind of maneuvering here. For example, if they play like h4, first we play h6 here to potentially stop any Greek if ideas and any invasions on the g5 square. And h5 is the most common move, preventing us from moving this pawn. And after c4, now the bishop is closed off. And a very funny move is king d7. The point is after this, we'll actually bring our king over, and we will save our king for the queen side, so we can ask pawn, when do you know to play c4? Yeah, you can play c4 any moment, but whenever the bishop's like on d3 or something, you can always just play c4 immediately because you get a tempo. Now, I know you can play c4 at mainly anytime, like c4 even here is fine, but first, it's generally better to play c4 when the bishop's on d3 and you gain a tempo from it. And because of his double pawns, the bishop can't go to c2 ever. The advance where if you play c4, they can always just go back to c2 and retreat. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Wait, let me reload. Now let's move on to the sample game. This game was played between Nigel Short. Yeah. Yes. Wait, let me. Yes. Okay, what is your. Let me reload. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Um. Okay, we're back. My chat wasn't working. Okay, let's move on to the sample game. So here, okay, knight e7, bishop takes c3, a3, bishop takes c3 check, at pawn, white king d7. The reason why king d7 is because king d7 looks like a strange move. After knight bc6, you can always just bring your king to the queen side, and this looks dangerous, but your bishop is always solidified here, and there's almost no way to get rid of it. And the reason why you don't want to castle is because you won't be able to play as much as the king side. As here, you would have more chances to play on the king side potentially. Not now, but always in the future. I want to just try to long castle at pawn. Okay. Trying long castle is fine, but king d7 is just the faster way. And like for example, if you long castle here, long castling's fine, but king d7 is a quicker way to just get your king to safety like this, and you can always just develop behind king d7. Do you have any more questions? No, ma'am. Okay. Let's move back to the game between Nigel Shore and Anatoly Karpov. After bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and c5, not after b. In this game, Nigel Shore plays b6, again with this idea. And in the game, a4, and then bishop a6 takes, white takes a6, castles. And now Nigel Shore in the game plays a very counterintuitive move, but believe it or not, it's actually the top move. Funnily enough. Knight b8. Now, the point of this move is, of course, the knight's doing nothing here. So you actually want to reroute the knight like this. Potentially knight bc6, knight here, and castle. And in the game, white plays knight g5, h6 kicks it away, and after queen h5, g6 is actually... Why not knight c7 pawn? Well, knight g7, the knight's not doing anything here as well. The pawn blocks this, and this will just waste another tempo. You can't move to any of these squares. And after castling, again, the knight can't do anything here. The knight has nowhere to go. b5. Yeah. But you weaken this pawn. You weaken this pawn, and if b5, of course, they can always play a5 and ignore your threat. They don't always have to respond. Like, for example, if we play a few moves here, b4, and of course, this pawn would always be hanging. If you take first, then they just fix their pawn structure. It allows more ways to reroute your knight. So, in the game, knight g5, a6 gets away to knight, queen h5. And here, g6 is actually a mistake, because you want to castle here, but now this pawn, this h6 pawn is actually very weak. So in the future, if the knight ever moves, you could always potentially take. So actually, I recommend, instead of Miguel Short's move, I'm not calling Miguel Short a bad player. He's a GM, of course. I recommend castling because now the pin is no longer here, and you're threatening knight, and the knight has to move away. And after a witch and so, you can play something like 97, knight here, and continue just pressuring. And this sack doesn't work because you just have too much, what? You can just defend very easily. So this sack doesn't work. I was thinking queen c7 ideas. Where? Here? Yeah. Yeah, let me check. Okay, now the sack actually works according to the engine, because reason the sack works now is because the queen is now out of play. The queen would have to go back, but then this would be devastating. Whereas when the queen is here, like, just to give you check real quick, and as you can see here, it is -1 because the queen is here and you can defend much easier. But then when the queen is on c7, now the sack is actually very dangerous for black. Questions? Can you play it out at pawn? Alright, so bishop takes h6, takes, and this. And now at best, white actually has a draw at best. But white will actually be the one playing for a win. For example, here, here, here. Again, you can always go for a draw. But here, yeah. Engine just like queen g4 check. Yeah, and you bring your knight. Yeah. I don't see. What if knight d7? How does the sack not work? Alright, the reason why the sack doesn't work when the queen's on d8 after knight d7, bishop takes h6, takes. Now this check is no longer here because the queen is guarding. You see? And you always have time to potentially get out and defend the attack. Like, just a few more moves in f6, blocking this, and opening up the f-file and making counterplay. You have any more questions? Okay. Okay. Now, moving on in the game. G6 kicks away the queen. Ministry maintaining the pin. C takes c4. And now, knight bc6. This pawn's under attack. This pawn's hanging now, so knight f3 back to defend. And now, of course, Miguel Short plays the funny move of king d7 to maneuver his king over to the queen side. c3 further guards the pawn. Rook c8 potentially pressures his pawn. There are ideas of knight a5 and knight c4 to occupy an outpost, or maybe even knight b3. So after knight d2, white's trying to reroute. Now knight a5 stops that and potentially gets a c5 square and pressures his pawn. Yeah, queen f5 attacks the f7 pawn. Rook h7 defends it. You might ask, why not this? The reason why not this is because the rook kind of has like more-ish room to move, while on rook f8 it's basically like held still. Like, it has no move but to guard this pawn. And also, if I'm not wrong, yeah, this pawn's also going to be hanging if the knight ever moves. So in the game, rook a7, bishop a3, putting pressure on this diagonal and occupying these squares. Knight f5, and then queen d3. The idea you want to invade here, so queen c7, preparing to tug the king. Queen b5 check, queen c6, blocking the check. Bishop b4. Here, knight b7. You might say, why not trade immediately? Well, now this position is bad because the a file's open. Knight b7, you want them to trade. Queen a6, rook h8, you cannot take because the queen would be trapped. Rook fb1, rook e8 guarding the pawn. And then rook b3, Now g5. Now Miguel Short is just trying to create counterplay here. Like he's trying to kind of this up. Maybe he might push his pawns sometime soon. But of course, according to the eval, this position is already really bad, which is of course why earlier castles is a better move than g6. Remember in the future, if you ever get into this position, castles is always the better move. So continuing on with the game. G5, Queen D3 back. Both sides are just kind of moving back and forth. Queen B1. Now A5 is just opening up this file. Knight takes A5, bishop takes A5, B takes A5, rook takes A5. And now White has kind of succeeded in their plan. White has now occupied this open file, and White actually has a very nice position here. But as you'll see later, it's not so easy to convert. It's Queen A8, like everything's defended. It's not easy. Rook A6, creating a blockade so the pawn can never move. And now King E7. Now Miguel is basically now trying to tuck his king here. So his king's just going back and forth. H3. He brings the rook out first, so his rook is not blocked when his king goes here. Now Knight F3, King F8. Now G4. G4 is very weakens the king a lot. So instead of G4, according to the computer, G4 was the best move. Don't listen to me. 97. Okay. Yeah, and yeah. Anatoly is just getting in here. Knight G8 is the only move to prevent every threat, preventing this check, guarding this pawn. And Black's position is slowly collapsing. Rook B8-3, continually add pressure. Queen B8, Black basically just has to shuffle around. After a few more moves, somehow, Black actually starts creating counterplay. Here earlier you saw it was +3. Now here it's actually pretty much equal. Miguel didn't play the right move. He should have played queens before here, continuing to chase this rook around. In the game, rook C8. Yeah, Miguel Short's pretty much just trying to play for a draw here. Check. Takes. Here. Takes. And this is just a draw. Yeah, here the two agreed for a draw. Any questions? Okay. To the final sideline. Let's move on to the final main line before we cover the sidelines. Now, this is the Tarrasch. The Tarrasch is basically what? Yes. Are you sure the poison pawn line? Yeah, sure, why not? Alright, whenever here. E4. Here. E5. C5. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Okay, yeah. Right here. Queen G4 and Queen C7. Yeah, this is the poison pawn variation. And you're basically gambling this pawn. And you're basically gambling this pawn to get this check. So, of course, they cannot take because, well, obviously, if you see there's no games found, then it's probably already a bad position for one side. So, they have Knight E2 here, Knight BC6. They still cannot take because Knight takes C4 is a very nice tactic. You threaten this, they cannot take because of this fork. And yeah. So here, 92, Knight BC6, F4, Bishop D7. Again, they can never take. Queen E3 to return. Now, after D takes C3, and then Queen takes C3, Knight F5, and this position is very playable for both sides, but I slightly prefer black here because, again, like, White's kind of behind in development. It's not easy to maneuver your pieces around. And, okay, Black's bishop's bad, but his knights are already in ideal positions. rook c8 in the future to put this rook on the same line as queen after you move the queen, of course. Then it would be a discovered attack. And yeah, like queen g4. Yeah, I covered it. Anything else? Okay. Now, let's move on to the final variation of the French, the Tarrasch. Hmm? Hmm. H4, H5 line? Alright. Okay, where? Yeah? Okay, like, where? Like H4 here? So I'm not pretty good at H4? Yes? Okay. Alright, so H4, um, here H5 is not, yeah, H5 is one of the least popular moves. And you just continue with the same plan of Queen G7, again targeting this potential square, the fourth. But okay. Oh yeah, H4, H5 here, right. So they're threatening H6 here, so you have to play H6 to stop that themselves. For example, if you play something like this, then they will get H6. And it will actually be a very hard position to play because now you are more cramped, and if you have a castle, well, this just feels very dangerous. They have plans like this to go Queen F6 and give a mate. Okay, so H6 has, in order to stop them from playing H6, and now if they play Knight F3, now you go B6. Now you see this is a very similar idea. Like you will trade this bishop. Like, a few more moves. Push D7. Again, bishop A4. And again, if they play one of the most common moves, the second most popular move, A4, after bishop A6, takes, day castle, and rook C8, queen E2, and the engine reval actually gives it an equal position. You're basically trying to reroute your knight here, continue pressuring, and of course, maybe you can always take and grab this pawn. All in all, like, if you manage to equalize, usually it's a pretty good position. Have any more questions? Well, the knight is on c6. What if white takes off c5? What? What? Where? Okay, wait. Give me a second. No more? Okay. Alright. Like, where are you talking about? Like, which move? You were from a6 to b8 to c6? Alright, wait. Okay, wait. A4 here. Bishop takes, knight takes, castles, knight p8. Alright. If they play d takes c5 here, okay, nope, not b5, sorry. You just play b takes c5 here, and they have a very horrible structure. And if they want to try fixing their pawns, they have to play this. but you can simply castle there. Now, if takes, you can actually take with the queen if they take. This is a very nice endgame with you. You can reconnect your pawns, or you can even play this. Move your knight. Both are fine to play. They have open b file with the pawn. Okay, they have to open b file, but knight bc6. Okay, sorry. Okay. They have to open b file, but you can always take it back. They can't abuse immediately, because of course you can always just take the b file back. And in fact, later you will actually be the one having the b file. So they can't use it immediately. You can always just try to exchange and take it back. And you have connected pawns. Their pawn structure is horrible here. And black should be better. Oh, what? Thanks, my bad. Okay, so apparently, yeah, knight a6 is the better move. Sorry for the error on my behalf. To guard this pawn, and bishop a3 will just run into nothing, apparently. Do you have any more questions, Dominic G? I think we've mostly covered the winner first, so now I move on to the final variation. It's to Tarrasque. Against the Tarrasque, you can a lot of GM. There are multiple moves. You can play knight f6 or c5. I prefer c5 more because it immediately creates a very dynamic open position. You can play knight f6 and it leads to a more close maneuvering game where you play c5. You can discuss that line by yourself if you want. But for now, we'll be covering c5. c5 here. c5 here. E takes d5 is the most common move. You can actually take with the queen here because the knight has already moved to d2, so there was no knight c3 attacking. Here, d takes c5. You can just go knight c5. This pawn's a dead pawn. If you go knight b3, and trade, knight b7, and bishop e3. If they keep holding on to the pawn, pretty sure you can just go knight g4, d6, knight f6. Of course, you don't want to play like that immediately, but takes first. Yeah, takes first. Then you go knight f6, bishop g5 here. And you actually take with the pawn and get an open g file to try attacking. The reason you don't play like this is because knight d6 check. Yeah, it's equal here. Okay, down to the last 4 people. Okay, now let's cover the sample game. This game was played between 2 popular GMs, Lagrave Vachiram, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and Fabiano Caruana. E4, E6, D4, D5, knight D2, D5, knight G3, C takes D4, knight takes D4, knight F6, in this line, targeting the pawn. E takes D5, queen takes D5, targeting the knight. Goes knight B5 here, threatening this fort. Queen D8 goes back, defending it. Bishop D3, developing A6, knight C3, knight C6, castles, knight E5, bishop E2, B5, knight F3. Queen takes C1, rook takes C1, and he goes back here. The reason is if you trade knights, then his bishop will be extremely active. So knight C6, bishop F4, developing, bishop E7, taking the open diagonal. Well, not open yet until this knight moves. A3 prevents a potential b4, bishop c5, and then he goes b4, kicking away the bishop. Bishop e7 retreating, knight e5 takes. The bishop is now open on the diagonal. And now finally, Fabiano castles, a4 trying to create an open file. B takes a4, and then after knight takes a4. This pawn's not free because of a tactic here. And then d5. Knight d5, trying to take the knight. And here, d4, again baiting black to take the pawn here. But here, now because the c pawn has actually moved too far, now you can actually simply take, because after, if they play like this, then now you can play a5. And now it's just a free pawn because they no longer have c5 to c3 to kick away the knight and take the bishop. Here, you actually played rook d7, seemingly forking. But now after this, now, like, luckily enough, black actually gets the bishop back. Or but in the game, he gets one rook and a pawn for 2 pieces. Now, White doesn't have a very good position here. But slowly, as you trade more pieces, rook's value actually increases over the knight and bishop. Now, here Fabiano uses his resources, pushing his pawn further and further, and due to this weak due to these 2 pieces being very weak and this king here, now b2 is actually possible because after takes, this comes with the check. And here, and the pawn stopped. And Fabiano went on to win the game convincingly. Now that we've finished all the main variations, now let's cover the leftover. Now let's clean up. Now we'll cover the win for sidelines. Okay. The main sidelines here are the Alahan Roxy Gambit, a3, and bishop d2. Now, that's a3, bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, d takes c4, queen g4. Now knight f6, we can't really save this pawn. Take, and we get a lot of counter play for this. Okay. After queen d2, b6 trying to fianchetto, knight e2, bishop b7, knight f4. We can just return to g8, and if they just develop normally, then we also develop normally, and castling would probably be very risky for them because we have this open g file, and they'd be castling straight into our attack. Okay, now let's cover bishop d2. Against bishop d2, you can simply just take the pawn. They take, then of course that's just a free pawn. So in the game, queen g4. Now you can just play knight f6 here. After queen takes g7, rook g8, queen h6. No, not queen h7. Queen h6. And now very interesting. You take the pawn first, and after the long castle, you play a very interesting move, bishop f8. This looks strange, but after something like this, keep attacking you can just keep getting tempos on the queen, and then you take this pawn. Black is marginally better. Okay, now for the final sideline, the Alkin Maraxi Gambit, you can simply take a3, bishop takes c3 check, knight takes c3. You threaten this pawn, they pin. Now, knight e7 defense. If they pin again, then you play f6, bishop e3, castles, queen d2, f5, defending this pawn further, alongside castles, a6 kicking away. They basically have to take. If they don't, you keep pushing. Bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, and now your position is basically rock solid. They can play this, but after this, now they basically have to take the pawn takes, and now you're just up a clean pawn and your pawn structure is fixed. And you're just much better. So instead, f3, they have to break apart this structure part, and then you're just up a pawn from here. The position's around equal after e5, breaking back.